Welcome to Dan's haunted cottage. Step inside if you dare.
Hi there guys, I hope everybody out there in YouTube land is having a very good day. Now, I've just posted the first, well, maybe part one of the exorcist videos or vlogs regarding my friend the exorcist and the haunted properties that we went to. And this is part two, following pretty closely on the heels of it, I hope. All depends on if I can get it all sorted and that and get it uploaded. So part one saw us at a house in Bedfordshire that was haunted by a negative energy, and my friend the exorcist went there and I went there with him, and I correlated the information and he done the clearance, and I was present permanently throughout that investigation and throughout that clearance. And then, well, following on from that, I got a message from a guy who'd worked for this other guy previous. And he said to me, could you do me a big favour, Dan? Could you come to my house and could you see what's going on there? Because not only is our house suffering with some form of spiritual activity, paranormal activity, but my brother's been suffering with things as well, and my brother is starting to see things and he's starting to experience things even when he's out during the day with his friends, and he's become very aloof and just not with it and distanced. Now my first reaction to that is, right, okay, now what I want you to do for me is, well, I'll ask the questions because we had to be very personal in our questioning of the client, as it were. And I said to him, does your brother have a history, or anybody in your family have a history of mental illness? Because, we had to tread very carefully. We had to take angel steps. We can't just jump in there and assume that somebody's possessed or haunted when, a valid and perfectly good answer or reason for them suffering these kind of episodes could be that they're suffering from some sort of mental illness. So he said, no, nobody in his family had suffered with mental illness. And I said, well, before I come and even try and do anything or ascertain what's going on in your property or with your brother, I really would like him to either go to see a doctor or go to see a professional and see, because it may be a case that he needs medical help. And, I'm not accredited, I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I can't administer that. And I'm certainly not going to go in and screw somebody up who's already suffering with some form of delusion or hallucinating. That's not my bag. I'm not doing that. And any credible professional or proper paranormal investigator will go down those routes first and exclude those problems prior to going in. So it took a few weeks, but he got back to me and he said that they'd been to see a doctor and his brother wasn't suffering from any form of mental illness that they could put their finger on. They said, no, he seems perfectly fine, perfectly normal. I'm not sure the conversation that went on between him and his doctor, so I kind of paraphrase what I was told. So I said, okay. Now the interesting thing here was the link between the guy that I was going to do the investigation for and the guy that I'd done the investigating for prior, who was his employer at one point, and may still be for as far as I know. But it did concern me that maybe energies were being transferred across human boundaries, and he was either suffering from some sort of spiritual activity that may be coming via his boss or his boss's home, because I know that he'd spent quite a bit of time there. But anyway, I went. It was a Saturday evening, and I went there, and I wasn't really expecting it. And when I went into the house, and this is not something that I experience very often, it had the same kind of oppressive atmosphere that I'd experienced previously in his boss's house. There wasn't an acrid smell there. No, there wasn't any of that. But it did make me feel fearful, and it made me feel quite nauseous, to be honest. So I went there, and I said, well, look, I need to speak to your brother. I need to get him, sit down with him, and go through what's going on with him. Now, his brother was aware that I was going there, but I don't think he was aware of how deep I was going to dig. And I asked him a few questions, like what was happening with him, and he was absolutely fine. He was aloof. He was very, very aloof, and he was aloof with his answers. And I put that down to, well, maybe the guy's shy. If you're sitting down with somebody who's trying to work out whether you're being possessed or not, then, it's a very unusual situation. For myself, it's quite the norm because I've done it lots and lots of times and I'm au fait with it. I'm used to it. But he wasn't. And it was a very, very strange, as I can understand, a very, very strange experience for him. And indeed the whole family, But he was very aloof, and I put that down to that. And I kept asking various questions about what had he seen. And he said he'd been out with his friends and he'd seen hallucinations of a person coming towards him. He'd seen a guy walking around upstairs. He'd been in bed. And he'd seen various things going on. And then I mentioned the word, does anybody else in the house suffer with this? To which his brother said, well, no, we certainly, I've seen or heard things, but never experienced it to the degree that he has. Now, they live with their grandmother, and she'd also experienced things as well, but she hadn't really, it hadn't kind of phased or touched her to the point that it had her grandsons, particularly the one that was suffering quite badly. And then I dug a bit deeper and I started to ask him about, it could be a possible possession. With that, literally like that, he turned. He didn't become aggressive, but he became even more aloof. He looked at me. His eyes, there was, I don't know. I mean, he was a bright, intelligent lad, but there didn't really seem to be much of him behind his eyes. Now, that could be me being oversensitive to the situation. Maybe I built it up to being something it wasn't. But, I'm a guy that's done it lots and lots of times, and I've never really had reason to feel like that. But this one particular instance made me feel quite bad. So, tried to question him a bit more, and something happened. I've got to go out with my friends. That was the story that came forward. Now, when I spoke to his brother said to me, well, you know what, Dan? We arranged this. We arranged a time and a place for him to sit down, be free, and talk about the situation. But he didn't seem to want to talk about it once I hit on the idea of maybe possessions. And he was smirking and smiling as well at one point, which was very unusual. You could put it down to nervousness, but there was something in his smile or his smirk that didn't really have a true ring to it. There was something not quite right there. And as I say, I've done lots and lots of these, many, many, many of them, and I've never come across that experience before. And then he just went. And he wasn't meant to. He hadn't arranged to. And basically, as far as his brother's concerned, he'd lied to us. He just made out some arrangements that he'd made prior with his friends, which weren't true, according to his brother. And I can believe that. So he went, and my friend the exorcist arrived, and he didn't have any prior knowledge that we were going to get an exorcist there. Now, so that couldn't have been the reason, although the timing was pretty spot on, because he became very, very rushed just before my friend the exorcist arrived. So whether he read into that situation or not, I don't know. Now, excuse me a minute. As I say, he kind of made out there with a quick hop and a skip just prior to the exorcist arriving. So you can read into that what you want. Maybe that was coincidence. I don't know. But it seemed quite strange that he'd gone just minutes before the exorcist arrived. Now, the exorcist was meant to meet him there. He didn't know this, but he was he was noticed by his absence. The exorcist came in, felt the environment, felt it up the same as I did, came to the same conclusion that there was something not quite right there. He didn't know whether there was a connection between this guy, the property, and the guy's house, or his friend's house that we'd done previously. But it wasn't right. It just wasn't right. So we decided to knuckle down and just do an investigation in the absence of his brother. Now, we went up there, we set the equipment up, we were unrolling wires and all sorts of things because we had a CCTV system that was monitoring everything in the upstairs whilst we were downstairs, or even while we were up there. And we went up again, and we got to the stairs, and the higher up you got on the staircase, the more oppressive it became. Even though it was super oppressive downstairs, it was unbelievably oppressive upstairs. And we set the equipment up, and we started to turn the lights out, and we proceeded with the investigation. Now, I'm not one for orbs. I don't really give much credibility, to be honest. I'm not saying that they're all null and void, but I would think that good 99.9% of them are. There's the occasional ones that defy any kind of logic, and they're generally the ones that you can see with the naked eye. And there's something else that I've seen on a few occasions in haunted properties, and that is flickering lights. They're like little tiny dots, and it's a form of an energy. It's a form of energy. It's an electricity, and they just go on and off. They're in the middle of nowhere. They're just in haunted. Well, I've only ever seen them in reputedly haunted properties. And when I was in the bedroom, I sat down on the edge of his bed, and I noticed right to my left-hand side, I mean, maybe a couple of feet away, this is how close it was, 2-3 feet away, I could see these dots. They were flickering on and off and continually going on and off. And but prior to setting the cameras up, I was running the lines and the wires upstairs, and I shouted upstairs to my friend the exorcist, not saying his name, but for example, I'll call him, I don't know, Harry. I shouted upstairs to Harry, "Are you up there? Do you want me to bring this camera up? Do you want me to set this in this room?" And a voice came down and said, "I'm up. Yeah, I'm up here, Dan." And then I went upstairs, and I thought, oh, hang on, he's not up here. He's not up here. So I went back downstairs, and I spoke to my friend Harry, who said, "I'm down here." Went and spoke to him, and it was something mimicking my friend's voice, the exorcist's voice. From this, we kind of we worked out that whatever it was a trickster, or it was a prankster. It was some form of negative energy, and we proceeded with the investigation. And then at the end of the investigation, my friend did a clearance, and he did I suppose it's like an energy block. It's something that he did that stops negative energies being able to enter that house. And we packed up and we left for the evening. But when he came back, his brother was telling me that that evening when we'd gone, or early hours of the morning, his brother came back again. And he came back in the house, but the next day he was a totally different person. He was back to his old self. He was absolutely fine. He was convivial, friendly. He was his brother who he'd grown up with, and who he'd recognised his whole life. His brother had come back, as it were. Now, I don't know whether the negative energy was stopped at the door and the brother came in, but the energy couldn't. I don't know. I don't know how these things work. I'm not going to proclaim that I know how they work. They're beyond me. But for the exorcist, he kind of knew. And again, he was successful. This is a second success. Absolutely fantastic. And again, the whole atmosphere in the property in the house had lifted. It was lighter. It wasn't oppressive. Everybody was happy. And that was it. But as I say, the boy himself that we went there to see was something not quite right at that point. There was something definitely not ticking as it should be. And that is the story of the second property. We never did work out whether it was anything to do with a connection between that house and the guy's boss's house. Although we kind of worked out, or we thought, that it might be something to do with the land, because the land did have, we didn't know what it was, but apparently it had a medieval building on it before, but we had no history of that. And by the time we'd done the investigation, there was very little point in looking up what the history of the land was. So, yeah, so that's it really. That's the second paranormal story. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks ever so much. Bye now. Oh yeah, look after each other, look out for each other, be there for one another.